If the Green Bay Packers want to be a Super Bowl contender like they think they are, they need to keep the momentum going on Thursday Night Football against the Commanders. That and more on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome into the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, once again on a solo mission. We got a great show ahead. We're going to talk about some of my favorite games of the week, like the Bills against the Jets, a Super Bowl rematch between the Chiefs and the Eagles, but we got to start with a great Thursday night football game between the Green Bay Packers and the Washington Commanders. Before we dive in, I do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Look, it's Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network, and Crossover Thursday is always presented by Prize Picks. Make sure that you download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code Locked On NFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup, and make sure to check out your favorite team's crossover episode. But diving into today's show, we got a great game on Thursday Night Football this evening. Cannot wait to watch these two teams face off. The Green Bay Packers coming off a massive win against the Detroit Lions, and the Washington Commanders coming off an easy win, I would say, against the New York Giants. But this is going to be in Lambeau, always a tough place to play, and the Packers, with the way they played against the Lions last year, kind of confirmed everything I thought about the Packers going into the season. Loved the move for Micah Parsons. Felt like that was the type of move to put the Packers over the top. I have continuously said throughout the last couple of years here on the show that the Green Bay Packers are always praised for being the youngest roster in the NFL. But in my opinion, when the Packers have faltered in recent years, it's been because they look like the youngest team in the NFL. They make big mistakes in critical moments, whether it be turnovers, penalties, different things like that keep setting them back. So to go get a guy like Micah Parsons, you're adding a veteran player who can make the biggest plays in the big moments. And at the end of the game against the Lions, Parsons, who played limited snaps in the game as he comes back from the back injury, he makes the big sack, kind of closes out the game. It all felt so good for the Packers. They have such great momentum. And having this game be on Thursday night and be at home might actually be quite the blessing for the Packers, according to my guy Peter Bukowski from Locked On Packers.
It would be easy to let down after a week one game with all of the emotion that the Packers experienced on Sunday. Micah Parsons in his first game, all the adrenaline and fanfare that comes with that. And then having the pressure, internal and external, of playing the Detroit Lions in week one with all of the questions that they had to answer about beating the best teams, about beating divisional opponents. There had to have been a certain amount of catharsis. And if they were playing the Browns this week, you might wonder. You might go, there is letdown potential here. Instead, they play 3 days later on national television, at home, prime time, against another team you are battling in the conference for playoff positioning, for seeding, and for narrative space. You want to say, forget the Eagles, we are the team to beat? Punk the Lions in week one, punk the Commanders in week two. This is the perfect opportunity for the Packers.
And honestly, it is, because it's another proving ground for the Packers to show, like, hey, no, we're a dominant force in the NFC now. It's finally our time. And quite honestly, I said it was an easy win against the New York Giants for the Commanders. They won 21-6. It was never really in doubt. But I don't think the Commanders were super clean. The Commanders didn't play the best version of Washington Commanders football. And if they come out and they get a little bit of a slow start, especially on the road, short week in Green Bay, it can be tough. And my guys over at the Locked On Commanders Squad Show talked about some of the concerns that come along with this type of matchup.
I will say this for anybody that's interested. I love the under in this game. Just saying, it's at 48.5 at FanDuel, just in case you're wondering. But yeah, these short weeks are always difficult. Like, I think we all love football. Everybody loves to watch it, but we know that the product sometimes, even early on in the season, it's tough because you have players not going through a same level of a routine. And of course, I talk about routine. I think, Anthony, you know more about routine than any of us when it comes to that. But right, like this is something that we've kind of always seen is these Thursday night games tend to have some hiccups and maybe even slow starts just because of the fact that everybody's kind of out of their routine heading into an early week.
You definitely are out of the routine, Nick. This the fact that you have that short week, so you can't prepare that much. I mean, you think about it when you have short notice and you find out that, hey, everybody's coming over for a party, everybody's coming over for the holidays. You're like, what am I going to make? Let me go ahead and order a pizza because it's steady. We know what it is. So what you're going to see from Washington is going to be their base stuff. A lot of what you saw against the Giants, what you saw, the good thing, that's going to get repeated.
Now, the one thing I will say for the Commanders is, the New York Giants, we could talk about their offense, and I have recently this week. Like, Jackson Dart probably needs to start for the Giants at this point because Russell Wilson is so far past his prime. And I talked about this within the context of the Pittsburgh Steelers and Aaron Rodgers, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the show. But last week, they did go up against the Giants, and the one thing you can say about the Giants is they have a heck of a defensive front with Dexter Lawrence and Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns, who had an excellent game, and Micah Parsons, getting them all tongue-tied now. But you add in Abdul Carter, who had an excellent game. Like, the Giants' pass rush was able to make things difficult on the Washington Commanders. So from one perspective, you could say, all right, well, the Commanders are ready for a team with a great pass rush like what the Packers presented against the Lions with Micah Parsons and with Rashawn Gary. Like, they might be able to be ready for that because they just faced a really good and a really deep defensive front. But on the flip side of that, you could say, well, the Commanders didn't necessarily handle that perfectly. You know what I mean? It wasn't a great game by their standards in that regard. And if the Packers, who are a much better offensive team than what the New York Giants are going to put out on the table, that could be a bad combination for the Commanders. And I had trouble with the Commanders this year. I thought there was some natural regression that was going to take place from the incredible, game and season that Jaden Daniels had and that the entire team had last year. But giving up 12 pressures right away to the Giants and then going to face the Green Bay Packers, like, that could be a tough task on the road, short week, Lambeau Field. That's just a very difficult assignment. If the Packers were able to get 19 pressures on the offensive line of the Detroit Lions, I think it's fair to worry what they might be able to do to the Washington Commanders. So I got to tell you guys, I really like the Green Bay Packers in this game. I've liked the Green Bay Packers to go to the Super Bowl this year. I'm very high on the Packers. I think they win the NFC North, and nothing that's happened with the Packers or the Commanders in week one will kind of sway me of how I feel with the Packers being able to keep that momentum going, like my guy Peter Bukowski mentioned. But with that in mind, there are a ton of great football games this weekend, including a Super Bowl rematch between the Chiefs and the Kansas City Chiefs, and then the Philadelphia Eagles. Here we go, Locked On NFL. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride. They have more IIHS top safety pick awards than anyone else as of August 2025. Whether it be footwork or breathwork, we know that athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings this same intention to how they craft every model. You can feel the Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to the available Nappa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but. From the smooth handling to the intuitive controls, with all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. I have a Mazda at home, love driving the Mazda. Not only is it fun to drive, but great interior, feels great to get in. And look, like all of our favorite players, we sweat every single detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. Today's episode is also brought to you by 5-Hour Energy. It's time to fuel up and turn it up with 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. The grape ginger lime flavored shot brings the iconic taste of golf course's favorite to a non-alcoholic boost. Perfect for sinking birdies or making great memories with friends. It's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Whether you're out on the course or you're breaking down tape for days on end, you might need that little extra push to power through your day. And 5-Hour Energy Transfusion delivers the clubhouse flavor that you love without ever leaving the greens. What's the wildest shot you've ever made? Me personally, I chipped in for birdie last week on a par 3. Couldn't believe it, and it was powered by Transfusion. Picked up a little 5-Hour Energy Transfusion on the turn, led right into a little chip in. You gotta love that. And look, golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors. The grape ginger lime flavor of 5-Hour Energy Transfusion gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without ever leaving the course or chasing down the bev cart. Now you can amp up the fun even more. Just buy, snap, and enter for a chance to win a dream golf trip for 2 to any golf tournament in the USA. Tee up that trip. Visit 5HEWin.com for full rules and an entry. No purchase necessary. Excludes the Masters tournament. Ends October 31st, 2025. All right, football fans, let's continue today's solo mission for the madman of Locked On NFL, talking about some of my favorite games of the week. As a reminder, on tomorrow's show, I'm going to give you my madman best bets of the week. Last week, we went 3-2 on our best bets. This week, we're going to look to do even better. So make sure that you tune back in on a FanDuel Friday. But with that being said, tons of great games this week that I do want to dive into, and we start with a rematch between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. And one of the big things that I'm worried about for the Chiefs is the wide receiver position. We know that Rashee Rice is suspended. We saw Xavier Worthy get banged up in that game, and that's probably the number one thing that the Chiefs need to be concerned with.
It's surprising because it looked like a serious injury. It looked like something that could possibly require surgery. But now when they're talking about already starting rehab, that to me tells me that they think that it's not going, like, it still could require surgery after the season, but they're moving forward like he's going to be able to play and probably play sooner rather than later.
And that's good news for the Chiefs that Worthy isn't out for the whole season. People were freaking out and overreacting the whole time when, we saw Worthy bounce into Travis Kelce and all of that. But having Xavier Worthy out there would be a big help, but you got to worry about how fragile he's going to be going forward. That is a major contact injury with the shoulder. Xavier Worthy, already a smaller player. And look, I'm just going to be honest with you guys. We talk about, the size of players and how the NFL is getting smaller, and you don't have to be big, hulking wide receivers, and you can be skinnier players like a guy on the other side in Devontae Smith. But my personal philosophy with football is going to remain, I think it's very, very important to have big players because guys like a Xavier Worthy can absolutely get banged up more easily than some of these bigger guys. Now, not everyone agrees with that, but that's where I'm at. But it does make you wonder, are the Chiefs going to at some point have to consider some sort of addition at the wide receiver group? And we talked about it earlier this week here on Locked On NFL that Tyreek Hill, a reunion with him could potentially make some sense for the Chiefs. And I think whether Xavier Worthy is able to rehab and get out there soon, or regardless of the severity of the situation, and knowing that Rashee Rice is going to come back and all that, that's all great. That's all great. But at the end of the day, I still think that the Chiefs do need to consider, going out and making a play for Tyreek Hill. They don't have enough juice at the skill position spots. Travis Kelce is still a good player, but we know that he's not in his prime, and you can't just rely on Hollywood Brown the entire season. Like, that's not a logical way to get back to a Super Bowl if you're the Kansas City Chiefs. So you want to add some immediate pop to the offense. You want to add some of that deep element back to the offense. There's been a joke out there that, Patrick Mahomes is a Tyreek Hill merchant. He looked so good because he had Tyreek Hill, and once Tyreek Hill left, the explosive plays really went down. And the data may say that that's the truth. I don't know if I 100% believe that, but at the end of the day, if the Chiefs believe that's the case, then they have to go out and make a move. And when you're going against the Philadelphia Eagles, who have a pretty good secondary with Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell and some of the safeties in the back end, like, it's going to be even tougher for this wide receiver group to win. And speaking of wide receiver, one wide receiver in particular for the Eagles that needs to get going is A.J. Brown. And my guy, the legacy, Louis DiBiase from Locked On Eagles, talked about that.
I think A.J. Brown was hurt. I've been watching this player for 4 years now, and you know a player. You know when they're hurt and when they're healthy. That guy is not healthy. We knew heading into the season that he was dealing with a hamstring injury that kept him out of practice. He was up and down in the injury report before the Dallas game. I think your best player in the passing game that makes it go wasn't 100%. Once he's 100%, the passing game's going to be a lot better.
And they need it to be a lot better right away. And if A.J. Brown isn't healthy, the way that he looked, maybe the Eagles need to consider sitting him for a little bit to get him back to health. The reality is the Eagles can probably withstand that blow. The Eagles can afford to maybe drop a game or two. They just won the Super Bowl last year. This isn't about, being the best that you could possibly be in the first month of the season. So if A.J. Brown is as banged up as everyone is talking about and acting like he may be, well, having him play through it and do nothing isn't the right answer. He had one catch last week, I think only a couple of targets, and the catch came at the end of the game, an important catch, but it came at the end of the game. I just think the Eagles need to take the long-term view here, but regardless, this is going to be an excellent matchup, and if the Chiefs drop to 0-2, I didn't have the Chiefs winning the AFC West this year. I had the Broncos winning the AFC West, but if the Chiefs drop to 0-2 and played poorly, we might have to start having a conversation of maybe they do have a massive Super Bowl hangover, and not only do they not win the division, maybe they're going to be barely fighting for the playoffs. But I want to look at the team that I think will win the AFC, and it's the Buffalo Bills. And look, the Bills were absolutely awesome this week in their comeback against the Ravens, and my guy Joe Marino from Locked On Bills talked about that.
The Buffalo Bills became the first team in NFL history to win a game in regulation despite trailing by 15 points in the final 4 minutes. An NFL game has never ended with a score of 41-40. It was a scoregami. A quarterback had never thrown for 250 passing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns in any single quarter of any single game in NFL history until week 1, when the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen did all of those things. So when I say it was an unreal football game, it was literally unreal. Stuff that has never happened before happened.
Now, here's the thing, though. That's all great, and that was one of the best regular season football games that I have ever seen. But when you win big emotional contests like that, imagine how hype the Bills were to play the Baltimore Ravens. You know what I mean? Like, that is a big-time matchup. The game was super emotional. It was late on a Sunday night, and now you got to pack up, put that away, and go to the New York Jets, go on the road against a physical Jets team who had a really good pass rush, and defensive line played pretty good in that game. And the Jets look very much improved. So I think that this Bills-Jets game could be incredibly interesting if the Buffalo Bills haven't quite come down from the high of that incredible win. Like Joe was just explaining, that is an all-time insane comeback win. We've never seen it happen like that before in the NFL. It's one of one. Again, when you have big-time emotional wins like that, sometimes there can be a letdown. And with it being a primetime game and with it being at home, and now you go on the road and a Jets team that is going to be angry. They should have won that game against the Steelers, and they gave it away. So I think the Jets are a much improved football team, and we saw Lamar Jackson, a mobile quarterback, give the Bills defense fits. Well, Justin Fields, again, a mobile quarterback, I think that the Jets might be able to run the ball down the Bills' throat, just like the Baltimore Ravens did. Now, are the Jets as good of a team as the Ravens? No, but there are just some similarities there. And then you add in the situational evidence that I mentioned with the Bills maybe having a little bit of an emotional letdown. I just think that this game is very interesting, and we'll get into my best bets tomorrow, but the Jets with some points at home looking awfully enticing. But with that being said, we got a lot more games to discuss in this one. The Lions need to bounce back. We got Ben Johnson against his former team, and Aaron Rodgers continues to make me believe the Steelers will be a good one this year. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL season is officially here, and FanDuel is making sure that you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Once again, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I absolutely love using FanDuel. It doesn't matter what I want to do on the app. I can do it whether it's player props, spreads, money lines, building a same-game parlay where I put a bunch of those different bets together for a big payout. And even if I miss kickoff, I can get into the action with live betting on FanDuel. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're just watching your favorite team or you're keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, it's easy, it's the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays. And remember, tomorrow is FanDuel Friday, where I'm going to be giving out the Madman's best bets. We went 3-2 last week, so make sure that you don't miss that. Are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right, football fans, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL. We previewed the Thursday night football game, going into some of the best games of the weekend, the Super Bowl rematch, the Bills and the Jets, but there are a couple other games out there that have really caught my eye, and the first one is the Detroit Lions against the Chicago Bears. And as we know, the Lions had a bit of a rough go of it against the Green Bay Packers last week, losing 27-13. But, my guy Matt Derry from Locked On Lions doesn't think it's time to panic.
They went out there in Green Bay yesterday, and they stunk. But to already say, the Lions missed Ben Johnson so bad. And tonight, look, the Bears could light up the scoreboard against the Vikings. And Johnson could run a double reverse pass, and maybe the left tackle's out in the flat catching a ball. We're going to go, see where we're missing? Pump the brakes here. It's one game. The Lions were horrible yesterday. They were horrible. But I'm not ready to give up on John Morton. I didn't love the hire to begin with. All right? I was all for Tanner Engstrand being moved up. And if you watch the Jets offense yesterday, Engstrand did a nice job as OC for Justin Fields. But I'm not ready to call this a 12-round knockout, an 8-round knockout, a 6-round knockout, a majority decision. John Morton sucks. I'm not ready to do that yet. You've got to give him some time. Dan Campbell at his Monday press conference today said, we're not going to know about our team, and you don't really judge a team until like 4, 5, 6 games in.
Okay, that's well and good. But if the Lions come out here and they get beat by the Bears, with how bad the Bears looked, I say how bad the Bears looked. They lost by 3 points to the Vikings, but Caleb Williams looked awful in that game. He absolutely did. So if you're the Lions and you come out there and you go 0-2 in 2 division games, mind you, that's not good. And then look ahead at the Baltimore Ravens in week 3 on Monday Night Football. The Lions have a very good chance here of going 0-3 if they don't handle business at home against Chicago. Now, I'll tell you now, I am going to be riding with the Lions in this one. I think that they are. I've said it before. I had the Lions not winning the NFC North. I think they take a step back this year, but I still have the Lions making the wild card. But I'll tell you, I'll feel very unconfident in that pick if the Chicago Bears beat them at Ford Field. I mean, back-to-back division losses, that would be really difficult to deal with Baltimore on the road waiting ahead. Now, they go Browns after that. They go Bengals after that. But week 6, they play the Chiefs. And week 7, they play the Bucs. Like, Those are two really, really good football teams. Then Vikings, then Commanders, then Eagles, then Packers again. Like, they have a first place schedule here that they're going to have to navigate. And while I do think that they're going to find a way to beat this Bears team, if Ben Johnson goes into Detroit and beats the Lions to drop them to 0-2, I'm sorry, you can't say we got to wait 5 or 6 games. No, it's time to worry. It's time to be concerned, again, not only about the Lions not winning the division, but about the Lions making the playoffs. The NFC is going to be competitive. There's, the 49ers, we'll get to them in just a second as news is coming in that, Brock Purdy is not going to play this week, most likely, and could be out multiple weeks. But the Falcons look like an improved team even in a loss. And we know that the Bucs are good. And the Vikings, I thought they may take a step back, and they might not with J.J. McCarthy winning Offensive Player of the Week in the NFC. The Rams, the 49ers, the Cardinals look scrappy. The Seahawks could be pretty decent. Like, this is no time to be like, yeah, it's going to take 5 or 6 weeks to see. Like, the Lions need to increase, their urgency right now. This is a must-win for the Lions, in my opinion. But speaking of the NFC West, again, Brock Purdy could be out for multiple weeks due to a toe injury and a shoulder injury. We know that George Kittle is already on the IR, and they got a win over the Seattle Seahawks in week 1, but that could be concerning. Now, from the Seahawks standpoint, they take on the Pittsburgh Steelers, and multiple co-hosts. Louis raised his hand and said, yes, it was me, and me and the brain, Luke Braun, have fought over this, and the data queen, Michelle Majuk, hope she's feeling better, feeling a little under the weather, couldn't do the show today, but not to pile on, but a lot of the co-hosts on this show with me said, Tyler, I think Russell Wilson is a better player than Aaron Rodgers, and I never agreed to that. I think Aaron Rodgers has been better than Russell Wilson at every single point of his entire life. And Rodgers is the first quarterback in Steelers history to throw 4 touchdowns in their debut. And my guy Chris Carter from Locked On Steelers talked about how exciting it was.
You look at Aaron Rodgers. He completed passes to 7 different guys. 3 catches for Kenneth Gainwell, 5 for Jonnu Smith, 1 touchdown for Ben Skowronek, 2 for Jaylen Warren. He also got a touchdown, 3 for Pat Freiermuth, 4 for Calvin Austin, also with a touchdown, and your leading receiver, DK Metcalf, 4 catches for 83 yards. That 1 tip drill pass was pretty wild. But what's great about for the Steelers offense is they just put on tape several different ways to hurt you with the passing game and different concepts. And that's going to be something that can get really annoying for opposing defenses down the line. We've talked for years, go back to Antonio Brown's best days with the Steelers. A lot of times it was like, hey, you can't stop Antonio Brown, one-on-one. But if you could take him away and the Steelers didn't have another prolific receiver doing it for them, like Juju when he was young, or Martavis Bryant when he wasn't, suspended for the entire season, you could figure out a way to kind of mitigate that if you were able to take one superstar out of the game. I still think the best part of the Steelers' 2020 run when they were 11-0 to start the season was there was that just like a 2-month period where Ben Roethlisberger, each week, his leading receiver was someone different. So you weren't able to pinpoint what he was doing. Eventually that went away. But if Aaron Rodgers is able to maintain this for the season, I'm not saying 4 touchdowns a game. That would be ridiculous. That'd also be his 5th MVP if he does that, right? But I'm not saying he has to maintain the scoring pace that he's on, but I am saying if he can maintain the efficiency of where he goes with the ball, I think that's going to go a long way for the Pittsburgh Steelers, especially if eventually this run game does kick in.
Now, I believed in the Steelers coming into the year. I believed that Aaron Rodgers would be an upgrade. I believed in the defense and Mike Tomlin. I thought they had a great chance to be a playoff team, and I picked them to make the playoffs in the AFC. But the one concern I did have was, how is Aaron Rodgers going to fit in an Arthur Smith offense? I know a lot about Arthur Smith's offense. I covered him in Tennessee, and it's a lot of play action. Again, it is a lot of spreading the ball around, not really knowing who's going to get the ball, where they're going to get the ball, trying to trick people. And I was wondering, Aaron Rodgers at his age, is he going to be able to execute those things? But he did execute those things. And not only that, but they mixed in the stuff that Rodgers likes to do, being in the shotgun where he's a little more comfortable. If Arthur Smith can truly blend his style of football with the zone scheme and the play action bootlegs and all of that to give Rodgers easy connections, which he hit Ben Skoranek on a crossing route on one of his touchdowns, number 15 for the Steelers, and it was a play-action bootleg, classic Arthur Smith play. If Arthur Smith can properly, I know that Arthur Smith isn't a head coach in the NFL, we know that now, but if he can properly blend his style with what Rodgers likes to do, instead of at previous spots like the Jets, it was just, we're going to do exactly what Aaron Rodgers wants to do. Whatever he says, we're bringing in Nathaniel Hackett, we're hiring all his guys. One of the things that had me so optimistic about this Steelers team is Mike Tomlin ain't going to cowtail to Aaron Rodgers like that, which makes it a perfect marriage. I said I compared it to Thanos at the end of Infinity War, where he sits down grateful for a balanced universe and the sun hits his face and he can finally rest. That's what I think Aaron Rodgers is this year. He doesn't want to be the egomaniac. He doesn't want to get all his buddies on the team. He doesn't want to tell you who to hire as the offensive play caller. Aaron Rodgers is burnt out from being a leader. Aaron Rodgers just wants to be a passenger in this car, not a driver. And he picked a great car to get into with Mike Tomlin driving. So if Aaron Rodgers is willing to just be part of the plan and the Steelers are willing to meet him in the middle with the scheme, you got a really good football team on your hands. And I cannot wait to see Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers take on the Seahawks. And quite honestly, I think that might be an ugly game for Seattle. But with that being said, that is going to do it for today's edition of Locked On NFL. I am your host, the Madman Tyler Rowland. As I tell you guys every single episode, thanks for tuning in and stay safe out there.